All right, everyone, welcome to another Sunday night charting. So we're going to start with AMD tonight, and we'll just work through the list I have, and then we'll switch over to the Zoom chat, and I'll see what you guys also want to go through. Just like always, when I do my charting, I like to start on the larger time frames, just so I can get a better overall perspective as to what's going on and see the bigger picture on things. So looking at AMD, and I'm sure a lot of you have noticed the chip sector took a relief after they did run all-time highs. NVIDIA is still holding. MU is also Micron, another semiconductor chip stock, and AMD as well, obviously. So looking at AMD with the formation IC, I've talked to you guys a lot about how previous price action that's way below where we're actually at in current times, I try to avoid looking at unless it actually is close to the current price action, just to keep my eyes away from the larger time frames. Looking at the daily, we can see we have a heavy support that also held up for a nice pullback earlier, about 2 weeks ago or so, in early July. So knowing that we have a pullback that held going off the larger frame with, like, whether you want to call it a cup and handle pullback or a handle forming in this current area currently, I like to use this information when I come down to the smaller time frames now, just to get a good idea as to what has been happening on the larger picture. And I can use that support that I just mapped out with this yellow highlight to use for conviction. So going off the smaller time frames now, we had this little, why is it so big? There we go. We had this little higher high forming. We had a nice pullback that broke through the previous support, which we are now contesting in current price action on another pullback. The question that I usually like to ask people is, are people focused on the pullback and hold, the break underneath to see if it holds underneath? This will now act as a resistance when historically it acted as a support and tried to hold as a support in this area right here. We try and use previous price action to go off current price action, to use that to our advantage, because most of the time historical analysis does repeat itself and it does play a role as to what could happen now. So focusing on just the last few months, since about late May, early June, we want to look at AMD from a perspective of, was the sell-off on Friday, was that an impact as to what could be happening going into next week? I know there's earnings coming up. Tesla's one of the major ones, but not many in the semiconductor that could play an effect this upcoming week. We also want to take into consideration looking at tech sector, and also just understanding of, is the chart strong enough to break back above this zone that I just put in? The reason I put this zone here, I'm going to move this arrow just to give you guys a better visual. This is the support that I'm talking about that we held historically. I understand it's not a pinpoint. I like to tell you guys, I'm not focused on, like, if I have the cursor here at the 117.11 area, I'm not usually focused on a pinpoint price action zone. It's more so the area of a price action. So knowing AMD historically held support here where this green arrow is moving, if we move it to the current times where we rejected and we try to break back above, we failed to hold the zone. We're currently below that. So taking this down to the 30-minute now, this is when I get bigger into trends on the smaller time frames. We understand going off the daily chart why this yellow highlight is down here. And like I was saying earlier, it's not a focus on a direct point, whatever to a decimal. It's just understanding this historically had a reasoning, and using that in what we're looking at on the 30-minute, we held support. When we broke above, we held those bullish trends. And once we came back down, we still held inside and or above this highlight, which is going to be support for us in the current price action. Using trends now of making these higher lows, could we fail below like we did historically in this area before the breakdown? We came up, we rejected this resistance, pulled back. Historically, this red was support back on the 2-hour that we were looking at. Now in the current price action, that is the question that we have to focus on for this week. So taking this down to a precise level now on the smaller frames that people can use, I would be focused on a pullback possibly for AMD, roughly around about 114 a share on the dot, if not 113.5 to 114 a share. I'm honestly focused on the areas in between. I understand we wicked above here, and then using other zones slightly above Historically here, we rejected almost at that 114 a share, and that's also going to be a psychological explanation for price action respecting that level at 114. So I would not be surprised, and this is all like personal biased, obviously. I don't trade AMD as much as others do. And I'm looking back just to make sure no one's bringing up stuff that they see that I may have left out. But just going off a precise and patient idea and mindset of what AMD could do, the understanding for me is that we're stuck in between two zones right now, that being resistance as the red and support on the yellow. We tried breaking above the red and failed instantly on Friday, straight down on the stock. Now we're back below that area. If we pull back, I would expect 114 a share to hold as support. That is going to be a $2 drop. So is that possible? That's when personal bias comes into play. Do you want to take the risk of playing this trend line? Yes, you can pull it up. You can lower it down a little bit. But the overall idea is understanding higher lows are forming, just like historically when we were in the yellow, pushed up to the red, which is the resistance, and we pulled back. We broke above, and straight away we rejected that level. Not saying just the red, but the breakout did not hold. So chasing the breakout, obviously on Thursday, was this Thursday? The opening price, I'm going to take this down to the 5 minute just so I can see this better since I didn't really watch AMD. So opening price broke above, the breakout happened, but we did not hold the breakout with buying pressure. Sellers came in, took it right back below that zone. So for me and what I like to use, I'm a big patience trader. I don't like to rush trades. I would like to see a pullback to 114 a share on AMD for support. If we don't have a pullback, obviously the trend that we have, it's not dead on, but just the understanding of the higher lows forming on AMD on the 5 minute, the 15 minute, the smaller time frames compared to the daily. So I have 114 a share as the main support. Breaking upside is honestly just going to be strength above this resistance, which is the red highlight, and breaking above the previous high that happened. And I'll put a level here just so it's a visual for you guys. It was roughly 122 a share that tapped out as the resistance level on Friday. So using those two, for me, I would like to see the 114 a share hold on a pullback. If we do show strength tomorrow open or pre-market, whatever it may be, I would not be interested in risking getting calls if we're in the red zone, only because historically we have rejected and pulled back. So is the breakout confirmed? Do you want to wait for a break on the upside on AMD and then a pullback to make another higher low off this trend? That's when, like I said earlier, personal biased. I am different from most people that trade. I like to wait for contests, recontests. I'm not one to like play in between zones and going off once again the 30-minute time frame. AMD is back inside this red highlight and yellow highlight zone between about 110 a share and the 118 to 119 a share. So we're currently back in that zone, as I like to call it. And someone said we could fill the gap to 111 a share, which would also be a pullback back to the lows, basically. If you want to use the highlight like Mr. Trey's talking about, it's going to be roughly around this area right here, which would be a nice fill on the downside. I'm just speaking on 114 has to break. If that does, we're going to come right back to this yellow highlight to form a possible, on the bigger picture, these trends. I'm going to take away a few of these lines just so it's not as confusing. Take away a few of these arrows. What Mr. Trades is talking about is possibly a pullback to make a higher low on the major pullbacks on the setup for AMD. And if that does happen, the loading zone will be roughly around 111 a share, and that's what will send AMD back up to try and keep the momentum of higher lows, higher highs going off of the trends. So the next stock I'm going to pull up is going to be Boeing. I don't want to try and find these every time. I may try to type them in. So Boeing, BA. I have not looked at Boeing in a while, so just like AMD, I'm going to be going off what we're focused on. Just want to change. There we go. We're going to be focused on the chart, and this is all going to be like as I see it. This is what I'm going to be thinking about, because we did chart this last week as a group. So we'll see if the analysis we talked about did play out, and if so, we can just use the same levels as last week to go off of the current price action that will be leading into this week. So the main thing I was talking to you guys about, I'm going to change the color of this trend so it's easier to see. Yellow is a little bit difficult. So just going off what we talked about last week, I was telling you guys if Boeing breaks and or around 218 a share to 220 a share, there is going to be a rejection possibly based off historical price action in all of these areas that I'm putting arrows on. Boeing has had a tough time breaking out of resistance around that 218 to 220 a share. And just like we talked about this week, we pushed up to that zone, had another rejection, and we came back to the trend line, which I did not move. Obviously, it can break below slightly and push up, but we had the pullback that we talked about to roughly 213 and 50 cents a share. That is where Boeing currently is. I was telling you guys that is my personal waiting point to buy calls just to make it a lower risk, higher reward play. Going off the idea of Boeing, I'm pretty sure they have earnings. I want to say not this upcoming, but next week. I'm not too sure. So if someone can type that in the chat, it would be helpful for others. But just going off the smaller frame price action, I'm going to lower this down to the 30-minute once again, since we understand the bigger picture with why we rejected this red highlight that I just changed the color on. The idea of comprehending levels in historical price action, it plays a big role in the current price of what the stock is moving towards and or away from. Now that we're back making these higher lows, Boeing could be at a loading point. If we do break below, that is when this level will come into play. And if you level this out with the zones of the trends, it realigns with the previous higher low that happened off of Boeing in this area. And I'm going to change this color to yellow just so it has a little bit better visual appeal. So this yellow highlight is going to be the next support if we break off the trends. Currently the $213.50 area, that's where I wanted to see a bounce and or a pullback before buying calls, just to make that low risk, high reward probability in your favor. If we do break below, this is going to be the next loading point, but this is logically going to be a push for Boeing. Can we switch the background to a dark mode, please? Yeah, I'll switch to the background. Let me do it real quick. Any recommendations? Obviously, you guys can say anything. So let me see if I can figure this out, actually. So I'm not too sure how to do this. There we go, background. There we go. How's that, Mr. Trades? That look better? Do you guys, is this better for you guys to see? Is this better visually for? No, there's another one. Is it like the gray one? Is that what you're talking about for the background? Or the granite? No, that's not, definitely not it. Is this it, Mr. Trey? Is this one right here? Is this what you're talking about? Okay. And you guys too, if this is not as good for your eyes or the monitor you're using or laptop, computer, phone, let me know. Feedback's always appreciated. So yeah, hit the end color themes dark. Let's see. Where's that going to be? Hit the top left for the end. Dark mode's on. I have that on. So I think that should be fine then. This may be, I mean, we can work on this for next week. Okay, so we're good then. So yeah, someone mentioned they're looking at Boeing for a swing. I think they said the 26th, so 26th of July. Oh, for earnings, okay. So that's going to be next week for Boeing's earnings, next week. So I'll repeat this one more time for the just quick brief on Boeing. If we don't bounce at the current area we're at, like I was saying, the 213 a share and 50 cents, I was wanting to see a pullback to. We rejected the resistance at roughly 218 to 220. If we fail at the current zone, price action should lower and hold, or at least show support or some buying strength with volume around 208 to 209 a share on Boeing. Now we have, I'm going to save SPY for last. I know everyone wants to see SPY SPX. We usually only go over SPX like the day of with Rippy God, aka Hassan. So I am going to leave that for him to do, but we will do SPY very last so that we end on a good note with like the overall market structure. So going off of Microsoft, just like every other stock that I mentioned to you guys, I love to start on the bigger picture. And for those of you that may not know, I'm going to go to the 2 hour briefly because we won't stay here very long. Microsoft is currently at all-time highs. And if you want to see the even bigger zone, I'll go to the daily real quick just to show you. We're not at the all-time highs, but we're at the zone. So understanding that from the historical price action, we know logically there should be a rejection. Understanding we're at the same zone from the previous all-time high. And I'm going to actually delete all my drawings so we can start fresh with this. First level I'm going to put is just the previous high from the daily. Obviously, the 4-hour may be different. If pre-market or after hours, they show different price action. And there is the high roughly around $349.60. It's not a pinpoint, but roughly around that area, we have all-time highs. I like this double top that Microsoft had historically as well. So I'm putting 2 levels just for a visual when we take this down to the smaller time frames. So now we have these 2 levels. I'm going to take this down to the 30-minute just to look at what we need to see right now. So understanding we have this red level, which is roughly $343 a share and 80 cents. This can be lowered slightly to link up with basically this triple top, I want to say. And I'll put arrows here again just to give you the like pinpoint as what I'm talking about. Using this as support, Microsoft can pull back to that level around 300. I'm going to say $343. I'm going to round it up slightly, 10 cents from the level that's shown. That is going to be a major support for Microsoft. Understanding we rejected this level, which is the all-time high. It's basically a double top on Microsoft at roughly $351.80, roughly $352. Understanding a rejection is normal right now. It's not the fact of continuation by the breakout. We need a reasoning. We need confirmation as to why Microsoft is going to continue to have strength. Is the tech sector hot? Is technology sector good? Is QQQ going to keep showing strength on the upside? Talking. Yeah, I think, yeah, if anyone can fact check this as well, Microsoft earnings, I'm pretty sure it's next week, but I would not be surprised if it was this. All I know for this week for major ones is Netflix and Tesla. So just going off price action, the main thing, like always, I'm very big on pullbacks, catching heavy support to buy in for calls. That 342 and 0.8 a share could be a nice support for Microsoft. If you want to round it up, $343 a share is going to be a nice support. Understanding trends as well. I like to use trends. Many people say like trends are just lines you put. They don't show corrections. They don't show like significant probability to have in your favor. I like to use them for a visual so I understand we're in a bullish transaction right now. We're making higher lows on the smaller frames with trends. We're still holding. We're still pushing. We're in bullish formation right now. Also understanding that main level on top is the all-time high. Comprehension is key, knowing that on the bigger picture, because if you only look at this on the 1 minute or the 5 minute, it's not going to give you that big picture scenario. You just are going off what you see in the smaller time frames. Us understanding if we pull back tomorrow or Tuesday, whatever day it could be, around $343 will be a massive support based off historical rejections, historical resistance. Use that to your advantage. Resistance to support flips, pullbacks are healthy in those scenarios. It's not on the 1 minute or the 5 minute we're selling off, this is bad. Healthy pullbacks are normal to keep price action moving higher on the bigger time frames. Microsoft's earnings is going to be 7/25, July 25th. So using this, it's a very brief explanation for Microsoft. Main support on a pullback I see is roughly $343 a share. If we do continue upside, you have to understand after we break the all-time high at roughly, I'm going to round it again, $352 a share, we're practically in no man's land. How much higher can this go? If we look at NVIDIA for like a good visual, their earnings sent it way past all-time high. So could Microsoft slowly be in the same category for a push from the earnings release? That's one thing to keep in mind. Earnings is obviously a gamble. Tech has been hot. Could Microsoft beat their estimates? Could they cause a rush into people wanting to flood in with share buyers? That's the main thing to take into consideration with Microsoft this week. So now we're going to slowly go into Neo, which I do know where this is on my list, so I don't got to type it. So Neo for you guys, this is one stock that I personally chart very often, I would say. Neo's on my watch this week, so I have already prepared for myself. So I'll briefly give you guys my breakdown, what I'm waiting for. I will not play this if it doesn't align how I want it. If it keeps going up Monday and Tuesday after this very slight pullback, which I want more of, I will not chase NEO, even though this is on my watch list, like top of the list practically. I'm going to move over to the 4-hour real quick, just so I can give you guys a bigger visual that personally I already know what it's looking like, but I want you guys to be on the same page as me as well. Focused on the bigger picture with NEO. We've broken above the previous resistance levels, roughly around that $11 a share, $10.80 a share. We're going to be looking at, can we break above and hold? Resistance flip to support, can we hold on the pullback? As of now, just like with AMD, we're at a level that I feel we can still pull back more. AMD is at a buying zone, NEO just as well if you're looking at main zones that rejected and or held historically, but I would like to see more of a pullback to roughly just around $10 a share for NEO. The reasoning for that, with my personal bias, I want to see the trends hold right here that I'm moving. I would like to see a healthier pullback, not just going off of this yellow zone I'm moving, this pullback right here. I want to see a complete healthy pullback to the trend that will also hold my level that I have as a support at roughly $10 a share. That is the only way I personally will enter NEO, only because my conviction's that high for it. It is a small cap. It moves relatively slow unless news or momentum picks up on it. I don't want to chase NEO and risk consolidation. I don't want to risk a slight pullback, because with these contracts being so cheap, the price fluctuation will be extravagant compared to how much you can make. If they cost $30 a contract, 0.30, one slight pullback could lower them to 0.25. You're down a decent amount if you have 10 plus contracts. For a slight move like that, you have to be very cautious. So for these type of plays, I like to wait for the lowest probability of loss, where my reward is going to be a lot higher. So just going off my arrows, as you guys can see, I'm not saying we're going to push the $12 this week or next week, but the overall picture on NEO is showing strength up to a $12 resistance level. If we do pull back to $10 a share, my personal plan is to buy a $10 contract premium, whether it's this week or next week expiration. Due to Tesla having earnings, I do feel like sympathy could play a role with NEO stock. That is personally how I am looking at this. I don't want to force it. We're currently at a zone I want to see hold a support, but since we're slightly lower than that, I'm not going to just hope, oh, we're below this zone. This could be a wick on the 4-hour, which I'm going to pull up the 4-hour real quick. Like, this could be a wick on the 4-hour, and we're going to shoot right back up. Like a shooting star could happen here. I don't want to risk this kind of risk to reward scenario. I want to wait for a pullback, because if I do enter around $10 a share and we do fail that level, I'm selling instantly. If I buy in at the current price action, roughly $10.50, I would not be able to sell with pleasure until we break $10 a share on the downside. I don't want to risk a 50-cent pullback when I can just wait to buy in right there. If it does take off right away, I'm just not going to be playing it. That's my conviction with plays that I wait for. So now looking at the next one you guys have typed up, it's going to be Lucid. And just like I said earlier, as I get through these stocks, I will look in the Zoom chat to go back through and look at stocks you guys have typed in there as well. Okay, so looking at Lucid, this was another plan we talked about. I think this was a few weeks ago I told you guys about Lucid. And the setup I talked about did not work out. So we can actually review this as a team and see what you guys think about my analysis and why I do wait before I force plays on specific stocks and or patterns. The initial idea with this was a break above this lower high trend, this purple line I'm moving currently. I wanted to see a break on the upside to the previous lower high, which is right where I'm moving this red highlight. Rejection on basically a double top that pulls back to the trend where I'm moving now, where the yellow highlight is. It holds as support, bounces off. We failed right back through instantly. This 4-hour candle straight red. If we take this down to the 30-minute, right at open, straight sell off. No hold, no support, no buying pressure. So we're back inside this falling wedge. Going back to the 4-hour now. New plan. How do I readjust when my initial plan fails? What do I do to basically put back into perspective what could happen with this stock? Is there still upside? Is the whole play invalid and there's no reason to even look at this anymore? I told you guys about this little red yellow line I talked about a few weeks ago. The reason I put this here, and I'm going to actually delete, let me just, yeah, I don't want to, let's just delete everything. We have these lower highs, we have these lower lows. the idea behind why I put in a random line right here. It wasn't just here for a reason. It can be lowered, it can be raised. The purpose of this yellow trend showing upside, a bullish momentum. If we did fail this level, which we broke above, but we broke right back inside this falling wedge, I want to see, why is it not showing color? There we go. I would like to see anywhere in this area, anywhere above the low on the chart that you see currently. I just want to see a bullish flip. I want to see higher lows forming to give me conviction that Lucid is showing a bullish trend flip from bearish falling wedge into a bullish trend, a possible rising wedge. If that does happen, not saying we're going to drop all the way here, because looking at the chart the way that I do, we are currently at a massive support. The reason this is a support zone, zooming in on this, I like to use previous lower lows, previous lower highs as support and resistance as the stock moves within the falling wedge or whatever type of wedge you're looking at. Going off, we try to bounce here, failed right in the middle of this highlight. And that's when we pulled back to, as of now, the low on the chart you see, the low of the low. If we do hold any type of price action above this low on the chart, that's going to switch to a bullish transition of higher lows. Using this yellow highlight, it's also going to correlate back to this low here, which I'll put an arrow just so I can't, like, I'm not just saying here and you guys don't know what I'm talking about. This level is here for a reason. People bought here for a reason. Going in current price action, it tried to hold but failed. When it did fail, we rose right back up from buying pressure. So if we do pull back slightly on Lucid to roughly, I'd say $6.20 a share area, logically off historical price action, we should hold this level, and that's when trends should reverse to the upside. I'm not saying it's going to happen. You saw the plan before with the break above, pull back to hold support based off the falling wedge, the resistance breakout, switch to support. It failed. So as you have a chart, as price action moves, you don't change your plan, you just readjust. Use the same levels you already know about, use the same plan you had on the upside, but be prepared for the downside now. If Lucid has a pullback, I expect a nice support hold at roughly $6.20 a share. If we hold that in bounce, obviously we're going to have this trend again that will act as a resistance. Using price action in this blue highlight, that will be roughly around $6.70 a share if we break underneath where we currently are. You have to understand the correlation with why you put stuff where it is. This may seem a little hectic, maybe very closed in with price action. I'm going to slowly zoom out to the 1 hour just to get more candles formed and hopefully spread out the candles so it's easier to see. This is basically the plan. You guys understand why it bounced here. This green arrow I just put in. Lower lows, we held a support, pushed up. When we pulled back inside the wedge, we tried to hold support again at roughly around that zone. We know historically we are currently at that bounce that should happen. Do you want to play the risk of knowing off the wedge, we are basically zoning in the middle of this falling wedge? Could we bounce here? Logically, we should, but do you want to size a full position, putting faith in the idea that we could fail through this and make a higher low at a better price to buy calls? That's the risk that you're taking with a setup like this. I'm just reading stuff in the chat, my bad guys. I just want to look back every once in a while. So understand Lucid, if we do not hold $6.70 a share, $6.70, I do expect a massive support bounce at roughly $6.20. Hypothetically, we do hold this support we currently are. Tomorrow and Tuesday, we bounce from here. You have to expect a reject off this trend. Roughly around $7 to $7.20, there will be a reject. You have to understand that. It's not the idea like, oh, we broke underneath from this heavy sell-off. It's not going to play a role now. This is going to play an effect if we push from here. $6.70 push to $7 roughly, that will be a reject. If we break out, that's when you use the same zone as a next level, which is roughly $8 a share at that point. Understand the correlation. We bounce here. If we pull back, this trend should hold as support. That is how you use price action. That's how you use patterns, trends, whatever you want to call it. The three scenarios basically. We fail the current support. We drop to $6.20. We bounce there and break out of this falling wedge. If we hold $6.70, we'll break above the wedge and or reject the wedge. But if we break above, we should recontest. I would like to see a support hold of this wedge break, because if we don't hold again, Guess what? Lower highs off the break. You're chasing at that point. You're chasing calls, expecting the breakout of the wedge, not realizing if we can't hold support on a pullback, there's no buying pressure. We're just going to make lower highs on the larger time frame with the initial fake breakout that Lucid just had. If we do breakout with momentum, $8 will touch. If we break past $8, this is when I use the previous lower high, which will be roughly around this area right here. And if that level does touch, that's roughly $8.80 a share. That is my analysis on Lucid from a personal bias, obviously. So I'm getting to the next person that typed up in the Discord Zoom for the class tonight, and we're going to be looking at coin now. For those of you that don't know, XRP, they won the lawsuit against the SEC. I'm not too familiar with what exactly happened, but I do understand it's not going to be a security underneath government regulation. And that news pushed all of crypto, Coinbase, Ethereum, Bitcoin, XRP, obviously being the major one with the lawsuit. Coinbase had a massive run up on Friday because of that, or on Thursday. Thursday was a news release. Understanding Coinbase from a daily perspective, as you guys can see, this is all we have. The massive support was around $48. We broke above that. Taking this down to a smaller picture now in the 2-hour time frame. The comprehension of where coin is and what could happen to put low risk, high reward in your favor. Do you want to chase where it's at? Understanding we almost tapped out at the exact same spot historically that only had a breakout on Coinbase. Do you want to put your risk into buying calls now, or do you want to wait for a pullback to see if strength holds? Could this news just be a hype push with volume, people flooding based off news, and then people that were bag holding sell the shares of Coinbase to lower the price action? I'm obviously a very patient person. I want the lowest risk, highest reward. I will not buy in this area. The main thing I was telling people about when we would chart Coinbase a while ago, this zone right here was a major, major factor. Something to watch, something to keep on your mind. The reasoning behind that, the historical rejections, which I'm going to put some arrows just so you guys can see it better visually. Knowing we have rejected this zone as a resistance, it should act as a support in the current time frames. The last breakout, we tried to hold a support right here. And for support colors, I'll change the arrows to red. So we tried to hold support. We failed. Once we failed, we couldn't break resistance. Couldn't break resistance. Couldn't break resistance. Now that we broke above, I'm going to move this to the 30-minute now. Break above, the pullback held support. And what do you know? News came out the same day. A lot of chart setups always align with news releases. I'm not saying every time, but this is a very high coincidence that happens. I'm not saying it's just like, oh my gosh, what's the luck of that happening? This is a natural occurrence that does happen with many stocks. News is aligned with chart setups. The breakout hit on coin. People probably chased. They see a heavy pullback the next day, probably sell in fear. News comes out and pumps the price. That's just how this all works. So at this point, what do you want to wait for? Do you want to use the low on Friday as a support pullback? Is that low risk for you? Is that still a high risk, knowing that we could pull back roughly to $92 a share from the breakout level that rejected? We have multiple indications that we have to look at. I'm going to change this to green. So understand the bigger picture now. You guys see why I was heavy on this rejection around $85 a share, $80 a share. Now that we're above, will continuation just hit? Could a pullback happen? Mr. Trey said crypto's a scam. So understanding chart setups. Will this level, I'm going to lower this to the 15 since we're only focused on the last 2 days of Coinbase. Could this support hold? Could we slowly form lower highs? We push, we reject. People think Coinbase is running again. They chase the breakout at open just to reject back down. We hit that support. Then we try and push back up again. Could this cycle form for Coinbase just to hit the main support that I personally would like to have for calls, and then to send back up to potential breaks of 116 a share? I'm just throwing out biased opinions. This is not what is going to happen. I'm not saying follow this to a point. Do what you feel is best. But I like to prepare for the lowest risk, highest reward. I will only buy if Coinbase drops to $92 a share. And if you guys think like, oh, that's such a big drop, it's not going to happen. Coinbase just ran roughly almost, what, $30 in a day possibly. That's what almost happened. Just under $30 in a day on Thursday. Could that happen on the downside? Not $30, but $10, $15. Sellers come in after bag holding shares of Coinbase. You never know. So I like to prepare for the best high reward, low risk scenarios using historical rejections as the next support on a pullback. Next thing we're going to look at is lift. Now, I do not believe we have looked at this. So this will be a nice stock to pull up and look at as a team, I personally feel. So Lyft is a cheap stock. Since we've never looked at it, I'm going straight to the daily chart just so we can all understand where it is sitting on the larger time frame. It looks like we are trying to base out and curl at all-time lows. So now that I understand where it's at on the bigger picture, the only level that matters if we push on the upside is basically this bounce right here, roughly $15 a share. Knowing everything up here does not matter until we break resistance along the way. I can zoom in a lot closer and not worry about the daily time frame. So I'm on the hourly right now, and I may take this even larger just to pick up everything just slightly below. There we go. So we're on the 2-hour time frame right now for Lyft. Just like every other chart setup, the biggest thing I want to talk to you guys about, first off, is this trend right here. Lower lows. We're slowly switching to a bullish standpoint. Let me actually change these colors. I'm gonna make red support, and then obviously uptrend and bullish will keep yellow. So understanding trends are reversing. We've had the same setup before of higher lows forming. Will this be the curl? Will this be the low on the lift to bring it back to where it should be, above 15 a share, above 14 a share, whatever you want to look at it wise? Understanding that from a bigger perspective, notice what it has to hold on a pullback. Notice what it has to break on the upside. We are currently trying to hold a support bounce, just like Coinbase set up as well. Can we hold what we historically could not break out of? We held this, obviously, as a massive resistance. Can we now hold this as a support in the current time frames? That is the question you should be asking yourself if you're looking at Lyft to play this stock. Knowing the fact if we do break underneath this quote unquote current price action for a support, we are going to hit this trend for higher lows. So this is when your personal bias comes in. Do you want to risk this support holding at roughly $11 a share? Do you want to wait for a pullback to make higher lows and keep trends around roughly $10.50 a share? This is when, and I keep saying this word, I apologize, but personal biased. What do you want to wait for? What do you want to take into account to make your play work out? For me, you should know my answer. I would like to see this pullback hit first. That's just me personally. If you want to play the support, realize the risk. It can break through. This could be a false breakout, or it could be the last dip before we rip back up to the upside for Lyft. If we do push up, this is when I take into consideration the main level I charted on the daily time frame was roughly 15 a share. But if we do break upside, we have to take these previous lower lows into consideration for levels. These all happen for a reason. They are not bounced there just because. So understanding that, we have a rough level slightly above this support that should hold at roughly $11. That's going to be up to about $12.50, $12.60 a share. So using that level, you can get a small zoning idea as to what could potentially happen if you want to play this. So now we're going to look at CRM, and I see you guys listing stocks in the Zoom chat. Don't think I'm ignoring you. I just want to get through the Discord first before we move on to the Zoom chat stocks. So CRM, let's pull this up and start on the daily. Looks like we're pushing. Okay. So understanding CRM from the bigger picture first before taking it down to the smaller time frames. We have broke out this little rejection we had historically. We are currently above that. We cannot break that area right here where this arrow is. It was a nice rejection. It seemed like it was almost for a week or so straight that we kept rejecting that level as we pushed up. Now that we are above that, I'm going to take this down to the 1 hour time frame. Understand that we're above now. Could we hold this level on a pullback? Is this the bull flag that will just break out if we hold? A lot of people have different scenarios that they put in the picture. Also take into consideration this tap out. Personally, as you guys know, I keep saying this, I like to see supports that hold after resistance to support flips happen. I like to see pullback. I like to see volume increase on buying side. I want to see higher lows and also resistances that were heavy that could not break on the upside historically now act as a support for people to buy in when they miss the breakout. If we do pull back to $221 a share, roughly around that area, it's a nice support zone. If this bull flag plays out and we push upside, this is where I'm going to go back to the daily chart to find a resistance on the upside that could come into effect. And I'm actually going to switch to the 4 hours since we can see all that. We can also take into consideration pre-market and after hours. So we had a main rejection around here, and using this for our current area, this acted as a resistance here, but also historically it tried to hold as support. Once we broke above that level, we had a fake out right here that pulled back underneath. Once we broke above that level, we held on a pullback to show buying pressure, and it kept higher lows in trend formation. Now that we're underneath that level, that is going to be the first target, which is currently slightly above where we are on this quote unquote bull flag, if you want to call it. So your risk, obviously, resistance at roughly $234 a share. And I'm going to change the support to red just so it's a little bit more appealing. And then we have a main support that I personally would like to see pull back to at roughly $221, $222 a share. We're in the middle of a zone. So understand it's kind of like a 50-50 scenario. Could this push higher? Could we have a slight retraction to form a higher low, aka resistance to support flip? That's what you have to take into consideration for CRM. So the last stock I see on Discord, LMT. We're going to pull this up and let's look at this. Going to the daily chart just so we can see the bigger picture. I want to see where it's sitting on the larger side before we just get into this. So just going off the daily, right away I see a support that held. So we know we're making higher lows. We understand we're pushing upside. Could a pullback happen? Could we keep rejecting this resistance that we had, will currently have in current price action? Historically, it tried to act as support. Using that into consideration, I'm going to change these to red since it acted as support. Could this level reject again, or could this triple top on the 1 hour time frame that we're currently looking at now, could this level break out finally? Could we be squeezing on LMT to make momentum on the upside? Going off the hourly, we have higher lows here, but also understand we're basically at a triple top, possibly quadruple, whatever you want to call it. Is there strength to push this? Going off just this trend I put in, I'll change this color to yellow. If we hold here, that's the best loading point for calls. But if we fail, where's the pullback strength? Understanding that it could be all the way back down to the larger picture, higher lows down here, or just going off the smaller frames. I'm going to take this down to the 15-minute, using the previous higher low as support. A fake wick, scare people out that thought this was going to break out. They switch the puts. Maybe people sell their shares out of fear, and it just wicks on the downside just to send it right back to the upside. There's always scenarios you want to focus on. Don't chase. Don't just assume it's going to keep momentum in the direction you need it to for a play. It's always smart to be patient. If you want to chase, just know the risk. With LMT, I'm focused on a slight pullback to roughly, I'd say $460 a share, $461 a share. If we can hold that, the main resistance around 466 to 467 will act as a major drop-off zone. We need buying pressure to break out on the upside. So now I'm going to look on the chat. So you guys that mentioned stocks like a while ago, I want you to bring those back up if you don't mind. I'm slowly zooming up just to look. I got Chris, you said YM. I don't know if that's a stock or that's just something you were like, you're welcome. That's a mini futures. So I tend to stay away from mini futures because usually ES, SPX, SPY, they all flow the same. It's just different costs. So we will look at that because that is Dow, NASDAQ, SPX, they move differently. I try not to chart those type of things since people can't trade contracts on the Dow, if that makes sense. If we have time at the end, I will go back and look at that for you though, I promise. So I saw XOM slightly below that. After XOM, we will look at Netflix. I'm going to get a list going so I can just click on them and not search them every time. After Netflix, I see Tesla. And then after Tesla, I see What is next? What is next? Google. I know someone just said it looks good for continuation, but we'll look at it as a chart as well. We just looked at NKLA. What else is below? Let's see. Exxon, Tesla, NVIDIA, AAL. Let me add these last ones. Okay, so if we have time after American Airlines, we can do more, but I don't want to stay too late tonight. So we're going to start with XOM and work our way down the list. We have about 7 more stocks to go through. We have about 13 minutes. So I have a lot of charting for XOM because we did play this, I think 2 weeks ago we played XOM. Or actually this past week we did, I believe. Let me check. Yeah, this past week we played XOM. I called this play out. So focusing on, obviously, the main support. I'm not going to delete my levels for you guys because everything here is pretty self-explanatory. I expected XOM to at least tap out at roughly 108 a share on this most recent bottom to an upside push on higher lows. Obviously, we rejected, broke downside of the trend, and now we're honestly about to possibly break and hold below the main support at roughly 102 a share. The main level I have put in is at about $101, which is where we closed at on XOM on Friday. And then I have a weekly liquidity grab, which I want to pull this up for you guys to see. The reason I put that level there was because of this pullback area right here. The fill candles, the historical grabs on the upside is a resistance. We're currently trying to hold that as a support. And as you can tell in the weekly, we're breaking below that now. Massive, massive wick to the upside that just filled the candle red to end the week. Taking this back to the 4 hour, where could a support be if XOM continues to trend lower? We had the same issue happen historically, roughly around $99 a share. We did bounce. So could that play into effect for a support? As of now, XOM is extremely bearish. They do have earnings with ExxonMobil. It's either this Friday or next Friday. I believe it's the following, but if someone can, please correct me. I just know Exxon and Chevron have earnings the same day. So just going off a quick brief analysis, if we can stay under $101 a share and not be able to break back to the upside, we should easily trend down to $99 a share. If Exxon cannot hold 99 a share, I do see a gap to roughly $97 a share on the downside. I don't see any bullish possibility with this until we break back above 102 a share and then hold that as a support. So switching over to ExxonMobil's earnings is the 28th, which is going to be the following Friday, not this upcoming, but the following, last Friday of July, I guess I can say. So now Netflix. Netflix has earnings on Wednesday along with Tesla. Going off the bigger picture, obviously everyone knows Netflix has been on a tear. We're currently at my type of pattern analysis that I like to say a lot is the cup and handle. We had the main fill in the upside, the brim is forming. We get the pullback, we start to curl on the upside, make bullish trends. Now we're at the brim from the previous rejection that we tried to break out of. Can Netflix break above and push to that 476 historical support that should now act as a resistance on the stock? There's a lot of zoning in between here. This whole zone in between is a possibility for rejections, for fake breakouts. It's very iffy with Netflix right now, only because earnings coming up. Could it be good? Could it be bad? Is the stock looking bullish on the setup? Going off the smaller picture, Netflix is still holding higher lows. I have a main support roughly around $430 a share that could hold on a pullback. Can we get that pullback? Could we hold where we're currently at and just push higher on the upside? Rejections I have is obviously a psychological at $450 a share. If we continue to go higher, like I was saying on the 4 hour chart, everything in between here is all chop historically. The main resistance that I want to see touch is roughly $476 a share on Netflix. Contracts are very expensive. I personally love to trade Netflix, but I will not pay that much on juiced contracts. The IV is extremely high. I don't want to put that much risk into a play. I'd rather just watch it and learn from the moves afterwards. So going off of Tesla now, I'm going to switch this to the 4 hour just so you guys can see the bigger picture. I obviously know where it's at, where it's sitting. The biggest thing I want to talk to you guys about, I personally am very bullish on Tesla. I don't see how their earnings could be bad in any way possible. Delivery numbers have been outstanding. Production's been good. Earnings have been killing it since we had that major sell-off back in late 2022. I don't see this coming down. I'm not saying buy calls and hold because Breezy said so. I'm just giving you my personal analysis, what I think could happen based off personal bias. With going off levels for Tesla, the main gap fill in the bigger picture, roughly $310 a share. I do expect to touch if earnings are good, if not soar right past it. If you're looking for a better entry point for calls this week before the Wednesday earnings, and I saw someone mention 431 for Netflix. So going off Tesla, a pullback. We're currently at, if you look at the smaller picture here, cup and handle brim. I love this setup. Wait for the downside, wait for the cup to form, wait for the actual curl, catch the trend reversal, going bullish from the bearish downside. Currently, Tesla is at the top. Can we hold support and rocket off of this? The biggest thing is the level around 279 a share. If we fail that on Tesla, the main support underneath is going to be this zone around here, which is roughly 273 a share. There's not much I can say about Tesla because I don't trade it very often. I know Rippy God, aka Hassan, he will be trading it this week. I don't see why he won't. I'm not sure if he swung Tesla calls, but I know he's been eyeing it very heavy before earnings. I would be cautious. If you can't afford contracts that's expensive, Tesla will be juiced, just like Netflix will be as well. Tesla overall, personal bias. I'm not saying buy calls and just close your eyes. I don't see why this will drop from earnings. That's just me. That's how I feel. If we do push from earnings, 279 will be 297 level will be first, and then 310. If we break 310, which we'll just look at it from a hopeful situation, I do see Tesla contesting. I gotta zoom out a little bit and then shrink this. There we go. Roughly around 325. If 325 breaks, I would not be surprised if we touch 350 plus. All-time highs, I'm not too sure. Just realize Tesla can move very, very easily with how volatile it is. So moving over to Google now. We've talked about Google multiple times in the past few weeks, only because earnings is approaching for Alphabet as well. And also the upside has been looking very strong based off this cup and handle. We had the rejection, pulled back, slowly formed from bearish to bullish. Now that we're up forming the handle on this cup, we are showing strength on the support I talked to you guys about at roughly 116 a share. I wanted to see hold 116 to 118. We held that level. We're pushing. I'm going to take this down to the 30 minutes so it's a better visual for you guys. Now we're breaking out of this falling wedge. This is when pullbacks come into play for me personally. Could we just send on this area? Yes, but understand we had massive wicks historically on Google in this cup and on this handle off the cup. Roughly 126 to 127 area is a massive rejection zone. And I will change this color to, let's go white. Understanding rejections, I like to see supports hold. We broke out of this falling wedge trend of lower highs. I would like to see a pullback to the support, which is roughly 124 to 123 to 124 a share. I would like to see that hold if we get a pullback. If we don't, watch the rejection at roughly 126 a share. If 126 breaks out, I'm going to switch back to the 4 hour just to show you guys visually where it could potentially go. If Google has solid earnings, watch the gap fill. The yellow highlight right here, roughly 140 a share. I'm not saying it's going to push this much in a week, grab 150 calls and don't sell. I'm just speaking from a gap fill perspective on the larger picture. 1 week out, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, 2 months, whatever it could be. That is the tap out level before another pullback if Google can break out of that 128 area. I don't see much consolidation happening again when it does break out with massive buying pressure. So now looking at Nikola, NKL, no, NL, what is it, NKL? Yeah, NKLA. Going off of this stock, I personally have not traded this. I used to watch it often when it had massive run-ups a few years ago. I believe that's when it was, yes. So I'm going to switch to the daily chart real quick. So understanding, same setup as usual I talked to you guys about. Lower highs, lower lows, wait for the trend flip from bearish to bullish. We are squeezing on this on the daily chart. Taking this down to the 2 hour now. Understanding current price action on this stock. Are we switching bullish? Could this make a run to the upside? You have to use historical levels as resistance, as support, whatever it may be. We're currently rejecting roughly that $2.80 a share level based off support that flipped the resistance once it broke below. We're currently rejecting that. If we pull back to roughly, I'd say $1.80 a share, this could be a good buy. I personally will not be trading this, but just giving you guys a good visual as to what you could do with this information. Focus on the resistance and the support zone we are currently in right here. If you buy now, it's basically a 50-50 shot that it could pull back and then go up. I would be patient just to see how this forms. It's trying to break out, so let trends do the work. Don't force a play out of hope. Oh, geez, come on. Don't give me that. There we go. So now we're going to switch over to NVIDIA. Breezy, were you trading Tesla back in 2020 when it was nuking every day? Yes, I was. I started trading options, what was it? I think late 2021, but I was trading shares of Tesla before it got too expensive. I was a share trader before options, penny stocks to be exact. So looking at NVIDIA, if you guys don't know, all-time highs, I don't need to be on the 2-hour. I'm taking this down to the 30-minute. Looking at the 30-minute on NVIDIA, however you want to pronounce it, what is the potential of an upside? Where do you want to wait to catch a pullback for support? I'm always speaking on I catch pullbacks. If you like continuation, if you like the adrenaline rush of hoping for, oh, we pulled back, I'm going to buy calls because we have to go back up. I like to wait for pullbacks. Me personally, I will not be touching this unless it pulls back to the previous all-time high before the breakout happened at roughly $440 a share. Yes, that is roughly a $16 drop. I get it, but that is why my risk is always very low and the reward is a lot higher. Understanding the tap out from all-time highs at roughly $480 a share, you are in a zone in the middle. You have no idea if this could hold as support. This could come lower. That's the risk you'll take if you make a play based off this current setup. So for me, I would wait for a pullback to $440 a share. If that does not happen, it will push up. That is when I play the reaction to the breakout. If we break above the current all-time high, I personally wait for the pullback to now a resistance to support flip. That is how I personally play setups like this at all-time highs. So now switching to American Airlines, and this will be the last stock, and we'll switch to the SPY to close it out. So going off the 4-hour for American Airlines, you guys should be getting familiar with what I do and how I do it. Continuation breakout on a pullback now. Where's going to be the support that I want to look at? This area right here is what I am focused on. If I'm trading this with you guys that know me well enough, I love trading American Airlines. It's one of my hot stocks for small caps. A pullback to roughly $17.50 a share. I would love to grab calls on and ride the momentum back up. This could fail support and go lower. That is where the levels underneath come into play. Roughly $16.80, $16 even. Those are the supports underneath if we fail that $17.50 area. Going off the upside for another resistance level, it's practically the level we just rejected, around $19 a share. Can that level break out as a resistance? If it does, resistance to support flip, I don't chase the breakout. I wait for it to recontest. And that is when I will buy on the $19 a share as a support zone that flips from resistance to support. So now I'm going to go back to SPY, and this will be the closing out analysis we do. Everyone was asking me about SPY this past week. What are my thoughts? What could happen? I was telling you guys last week, I wanted to see 450 touch. If that did break on the upside, I want to see 452 area touch. All of those did happen according to plan. First thing I told you guys about, if we break and touch those, I want to catch the pullback for calls at roughly $445 in that zone. And this chart I have not touched literally since last Sunday. This is everything you guys would see if you watched the previous recording on Sunday. I wanted to see a tap out and now the pullback. Everything's aligned to what I want. And now this week, it's all patience. Yes, we can break out. Yes, we can just keep sending. This is when my patience comes to play. I swung puts over the weekend. I'm still holding them. I have Wednesday expiration, expecting a pullback before the first major stock releases earnings, aka Tesla. So I'm going off levels. my key level hit, my conviction came into play. I trust what I chart, not what I think is going to happen, not let the social media convince me bulls are only here, no pullbacks are coming. I trust my technical analysis. I swung puts. I'm whether win or lose, you guys know now. If I lose, it's whatever. I size for my appropriate loss I can handle, but I expect a pullback, a healthy pullback. Notice the same thing happened. Healthy pullback, healthy pullback. They're all getting eat up. Healthy pullback. It's not a sell-off. Healthy pullbacks are needed for buyers to step back in if they missed the initial breakout or the previous pullback that happened. I would like to see that pullback hit, catch the trend, ride right back up, and push up to 450 again, 455, whatever the case may be. Can we fail this zone? Yes, but that is where low risk comes into play. I'm not going to buy calls now, hoping it continues. My call entry was back here when I bought in, around that 438, 439 area. I am not going to chase calls now. I'm in puts, trusting my technical analysis because that's how I trade. If the pullback doesn't happen, I sell my puts when we break 452 on the upside, plain and simple. Are there any last minute questions, any concerns? I will not be going over any more stocks for you guys. I went through what I have seen, but if you guys have any quick questions, I can answer them very briefly. So type them in the Zoom if you guys have any thoughts or concerns or anything. Yeah, you're welcome, Scott. As always, man, I appreciate you showing up every time too. SP, you're welcome, man. I'm gonna get back to you later tonight or early tomorrow. I got you. Yeah, you're welcome, Mr. Trades. iPhone 3, what's up, man? Man and or female, don't want to assume, but appreciate you for showing up. Let me stop the recording.